This is Stigma, where we talk with leaders from many industries about how mental health and addiction have impacted their lives. Many people suffer silently from mental illness, addiction, depression, anxiety, and trauma. They never seek help because of stigma. In this podcast, host Stephen Hayes and his guests share their stories of recovery in order to encourage others to do the same. Here's Stephen.
Welcome back to another episode of the Stigma Podcast. If you've been listening to us lately or reading any of the stuff that I've written, you'll notice some themes in the last few months, and that we're talking a lot about mental health technology, about startups, about increasing capacity in the mental health system to solve a systemic supply and demand problem that drives up cost and reduces access to care. And one of the solutions that we talk about a lot are digital therapeutics, digital mental health clinics, these concepts of those. And today's guest is Kristian Ranta, who's the founder and CEO of Meru Health, which is a digital mental health clinic, a fulsome clinic that provides everything you need to take care of your mental health digitally online. And he's going to explain how that works today. And I will link to the business and a lot of the stuff he's written and the links he mentions in the show notes. But without further ado, Kristian, man, thanks for coming on.
Thanks, Stephen. Super excited as well.
So I wanted to start by having you walk our audience through kind of your bio background, what you've been up to and how you found your way into the mental health space.
Yeah, happy to do that. Hello, everyone. Hello, listeners. And, thanks for having me today, Stephen. So I'm Kristian Ranta, and I'm originally from Helsinki, Finland. I started my first medical device company back in 2005. I've studied computer science, information systems science in a couple of Finnish universities in Finland. I also once lived in UK for a while, studied sometime there near London. And then I basically came into healthcare right after school. I joined a clinical trials, a kind of a digital clinical trials company that was a high-growing startup out of Finland. Had offices in Philadelphia and Boston and London already back in the days. And I stayed there for a couple of years working on some IT and information systems related stuff for one of the founders. And then in 2005, I founded my first own company because one of my friends, he's an industrial designer, and he also had diabetes. And he had an idea of a new kind of a glucose monitor. And then we kind of founded the company around that idea, developed it, and eventually became a fairly big company, few million in revenues. And then we sold it in 2015 to a Korean public company. And the Korean company was one of our partners in Asia, and they are also a diagnostics manufacturer. So sold it to them. And I kind of went into mental health then in 2016 by founding Meru Health, my current company. And that was for two main reasons. One of the reasons being that unfortunately, back in 2005, I lost my oldest brother, Peter, to suicide. And, he had depression and substance abuse issues for quite some time. And then, he couldn't get help from the current system as it's set up. Also, in Finland, there's very much the same challenges in European countries than in the US in terms of access and also, the long-term success and effectiveness of treatment modalities that are available for people. So those were some of the challenges with him as well. And unfortunately, we lost him. But after a while, after kind of selling my previous company, I had developed this idea that I wanted to do something that would empower other people like him, that I would somehow be able to use my understanding of medical devices, digital health, and healthcare business in general to build a business which would be kind of a virtual provider that would be available for a lot of people instantaneously, and that would be of clinical quality so that people would get access to the best possible care. So kind of had this idea of like a center of excellence that's not regional or tied to a specific location, but would be available for eventually globally for people through the internet, through mobile, whatever. And actually also worth mentioning that I also built my second healthcare business before Meru, which is my kind of third healthcare business, was a diabetes population management digital health business, which was a spin-off from my first company. So I also kind of worked in diabetes digital health for a few years before founding Meru. So those were the kind of components where I came from and some of the motivators. And that's how I kind of eventually founded Meru in 2016 with my co-founders.
I love your background, and you've got all this healthcare, device, business building, startup fundraising, exiting experience. I mean, you're kind of a unicorn for an investor. That's amazing. So I just had to say that.
Thanks.
I'm curious, can you tell us a little bit about Meru and maybe explain the tech and how HRV works, and just kind of walk us through what the platform is and who uses it and how it works?
Yeah, sure. Summarize, Meru is basically a technology-enabled telehealth practice with a 12-week digital therapeutic program and with providers on board such as licensed therapists and psychiatrists. So we are a provider. We have remote providers working at the clinic, at the virtual clinic, and then we have the digital components, the digital therapeutic in the app, and then also the biofeedback, the HRV biofeedback device that you're referring to. So how it works is that we work with employers and health plans, and we join their network. So we're basically we're an in-network provider, and we get referrals, and we do also a lot of risk assessment campaigns and claims data analysis and whatnot to identify people who would benefit. And then we can do direct marketing to them, or we also work with primary care clinics or behavioral health, EAP programs or whatnot out there to get referrals in. When we get a referral or when people self-refer themselves through a survey or through an outreach campaign that we also do, then what happens is that we match people with a therapist, with a licensed clinician immediately. And then within the next few days or so, people are typically on an intake call. That takes 30 to 45 minutes typically. And that's a clinical evaluation, whether the person is a fit for our clinic. And then, if someone has let's say schizophrenia or is in psychosis or something severe, then we triage them to somewhere else that's available in the community or through their employer or health plan, because we obviously can't treat everything. But then if they are eligible and they are willing to kind of start the program, then we'll customize it for them. We'll ask about kind of personal preferences and what are their needs and what are they suffering from, to then customize and make sure that the experience is going to be beneficial for them. And then what happens after the intake call is that they will then get to download an app, the Meru app, which is the home for the 12-week digital therapeutic, the program. It's basically pre-recorded videos, master class style, best different doctors and therapists and so on, teaching people different skills and different things, how you can become the master of your own mental health. And then we ship people a biofeedback device in a box in mail. And that's basically a heart rate variability, pulse oximeter, ear clip that you pair with the smartphone, Bluetooth connected. And then you will use that when you do these biofeedback deep breathing practices, like paced breathing practices, as one type of an exercise which is in the app. So it's basically something you can do on a daily basis if you like, or on few days a week or whatever. And we kind of tell you and give you feedback from that practice, as well as mindfulness practices, CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. Then we've also built in nutritional psychiatry, because nutrition, I could talk about this for quite a long time. But
look, I just had a guy on that explained how the ketogenic diet can cure certain mental illnesses. So
exactly.
I'm all about digging into this idea that our gut and our brain are connected, and that what we eat can really have an impact on our mental wellness.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's exactly the reason why we've also built in something we call nutritional psychiatry, and then also sleep medicine or sleep coaching and sleep content, because that again is a part of mental health that it's not always.
So it is like a fulsome digital mental health clinic. It could be one-stop shop for somebody who needs help with, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. Maybe some people who need to improve mental health, or people who want to deal with some things that they know they have going on. It's a fulsome platform.
Yeah, totally. And that's our goal. We really want to help people holistically get better and stay better. And I just checked our numbers recently. What's the latest on our clinical outcomes? And we obviously published a bunch of different papers with Stanford, with Harvard, with others. But I also looked at our real world data just 2 days ago with our head of research. And we are now I think we were at 92% of people will either improve or fully recover. So wow. It works for a lot of people really well.
So that during that 12-week period, how often am I as a user interacting with a clinician, and how often am I interacting with AI or a HRV feedback monitor with some insight for me? What does that interaction with the platform look like?
Yeah, great question. So how it works is that the intake call is in the beginning. That's a televideo kind of a visit. And then after that, you'll be mainly chatting with the same clinician. So you work with the same dedicated clinician throughout the whole 12 weeks. And then you also have access to a psychiatrist additionally if you need any kind of medication management or any other stuff that's kind of going on, would need like maybe some lab orders or whatever is needed that the therapist couldn't do. So then we have a psychiatrist for that's available. But you would basically, through the in-app chat, you'll interact with the same therapist that you started off with an intake call. Typically,
so the therapist gets to know you a little bit over the
absolutely
the good bit.
That's
right?
actually a really key part of our protocol. That people, they form a relationship in the beginning and in that video call, and then they work with the same clinician throughout the whole 12 weeks. And
that clinician works for you guys? Like that's a Meru employee,
yes.
Or is that outsourced? Or?
They're all employees. So we hire our clinicians.
Awesome.
We build our network in different states. Yeah.
So you're a provider.
We're a provider.
You're providing care.
Yes.
Yeah. That's awesome. What about after the 12 weeks? So the 12-week program is over. Maybe a better question is, as a user, what should I expect to have happened to me in that 12 weeks? What's my positive outcome? And then once the 12 weeks is over, what happens to me after that?
Yeah, good questions as well. So what happens after that is that the 3-month, 12-week program is the intensive piece. And then for the next 9 months, we kind of give you full access to all the digital content. And you also have the biofeedback device that you can get to keep, of course. We've shipped it to you in the beginning, and then you kind of own it and you get to keep it. And you can do your kind of HRV checkups and your biofeedback ever after with the Meru app. But you also, then have access to all the recommendations from your clinician, from anything from the psychiatrist, and then all of the content in the app. And that's for you to use for the next 9 months after. So it's a full year offering where 3 months clinician supported, more intensive, and then 9 months like a light touch follow-up with the digital stuff. And then what should you expect? So, well, like I said, like 92% of people currently get better or fully recover during the program. So, and what it actually means is that currently somewhere between 40 to 50% of people they will have no depression or anxiety anymore. They're under like that clinical threshold that they will have like basically no anxiety or depression after they graduate. And then when we just published some data with UC Davis some time ago, where we looked at what happened to people 1 year after and how well were they doing like 1 year after, and it kept on getting better. So what we've been aiming for here is like we really want to help people change behavior and learn new skills that they can utilize themselves, get empowered and learn new kind of beneficial tricks and skills and whatnot, so that they eventually don't need us anymore. And that's what seems to be happening. So this data is out there. It's on our website. Happy to share links to these research papers. But we've been able to show that people actually not only like did they stay at where they left when they graduated from the program, but they actually kept on getting better and were stable at the end of 12 months after the start of the program. So that's kind of the latest data point. And we're also going to be publishing our 2-year data in the future as well. So we'll keep on publishing also on the long-term effectiveness of the program.
That's great. That's really cool, man. I'm excited that you've built it. I think it's going to help a lot of people. I'm a big fan, so that's really incredible. Where do you see it going? What's the 5-10 year vision out there for the business?
Yeah, that's an exciting question. So we're definitely in it for the long haul. Having built healthcare businesses before, kind of understand that it takes some time to build businesses in healthcare. So we're working with different payers now. So we just signed a couple of deals with big payers recently. I can't yet mention the names, but there's going to be some press coming out fairly soon. Maybe even by the time that this podcast is live. But so we're kind of working towards expanding into more and more states. So we're now in 12 states. And hopefully by the end of the year, already like 25 to 30 states, working with big payers, getting included in their networks. And then also we work with a lot of more employers. So our kind of a longer term vision is to make the clinic available, like I kind of mentioned in the beginning, that we want to make the clinic globally available to people in different, states in the US, but also in other countries. So we're also working in Sweden now and in Finland, where we're originally from, part of the team. So eventually, hopefully in the next sort of like 5 to 10 years, we'll be also in like a bunch of more European countries and maybe in some countries in Asia. And the thinking is that, we are really here for the long haul to build this and make it available to a lot of people so that they have access wherever they live. And, my kind of a dream eventually is that we could we could be available in most countries one day and kind of truly utilize the power of the internet and the mobile to not get people more distressed, but actually get them access to best-in-class treatment.
That's awesome, man. I applaud you, and I'm excited about what you're doing, and I certainly want to try to be helpful, and I'm glad that we're doing our part to get your message out there. And a question I had for you about your entrepreneurial experience is, in this mental health startup world, what can a up and coming entrepreneur who wants to build in the mental health space, what advice do you have for them?
Yeah, so actually, I think I wrote a blog post fairly recently on that, so we can link that in the notes.
Absolutely.
But yeah, to summarize some of the points that I've learned in my 3 healthcare ventures so far, I think that quite often applicable, not always in healthcare, because there may be some software-only businesses or some other businesses that don't maybe need this. But what I've learned is that always do your research properly. So I think that's what I would typically start from if I'm building something in mental health or in healthcare, that I really understand like what is the best, what kind of research is expected, what is the best things out there, and like start understanding that, because there's been over the years and there's been a lot of stuff coming out which hasn't been researched properly and just out there, which may not be useful. I mean, like, I'm not saying that everything needs to be researched, like spending like 10 years to do the research before you get to market. That doesn't serve anyone either necessarily. But what I'm saying is that I think it's really important to understand that perspective when you work in healthcare and take it seriously, because you wouldn't want to use anything which is snake oil either if you have any health conditions. So that's just something which healthcare founders should always consider, take it seriously. And then one other thing that I've learned over my past ventures, I think the single most important thing, if I only had one thing to mention, is the culture. Like, and what it means is like when you found a company and you're building a company, it has to, in my opinion, it has to come from like a foundation of setting that kind of value base and the culture base. Like, what kind of values do you hold yourself? What do you really want to achieve? What do you want to do? Why? Why do you want to do it? And then kind of crystallize that with your founders, co-founders, and kind of set that tone from the beginning, because that will then guide how you hire people. And again, that's the most important thing in any startup, is how you hire, who you hire. And like, all you have is people. Like eventually, like there's nothing else, and that's all you have, and that's awesome. But you got to be able to make sure that you don't just hire people because they had a great CV. That definitely is part of it as well. But it has to come from somewhere deeper, that you're really like building a group of people with similar shared values and alignment on where you're going. Because if you want to become a successful startup or a company and you want to make an impact, want to fulfill your mission, you can't get there if you're fighting with each other all the time.
When did you figure that out? I mean, is that something you learned along the way, or is that something that you always had a sense of before you started your first business back in 2005?
Well, I definitely didn't know this when I started my first company. So got to be very honest. So I kind of, my first company was a great company. We had a lot of alignment in the company, but we also had a lot of battles and a lot of energy wasted, a lot of money wasted in just like kind of not getting things straight with us founders and with the whole early team and with our board and with our investors. And, it was just a mess in some ways. I'm not saying that it was only a mess. It was also a great experience. And you also learn from a mess. I mean, like, I learned so valuable lessons I'm super grateful for, but it definitely wasn't perfect.
So if I'm a founder, I want to build in the mental health space, where's the opportunity? Where's the white space? And, what path should I be on? Do I go to Y Combinator like you did, or do I go another route? Talk to me, give me some advice if I'm a founder and I'm super early, pre-seed, man or woman, looking to start a business, and I don't even know where to go to take the first step, but I have an idea that might be worth trying.
Yeah. So that's exciting. I mean, like that's a cool phase. Cool stage to be at. I mean, one thing that I also always tell people if they ask me like how to get started is that if you have an idea, you got to validate the idea. You got to find out whether it's something which is it only your problem, or is it, or typically things start from identifying a problem you want to fix. So that's maybe like kind of the first point. Like, is there a problem that you feel you want to somehow improve upon. Maybe you've experienced yourself. Maybe you tried getting some care for whatever condition. You couldn't get it. You're still struggling and you want to build something that could solve the problem or whatever else. And so that's first, identifying the problem, kind of figuring out the idea, and then going out there to validate it beyond yourself. Because sometimes, you may get a great idea, like for your specific purpose, you want to build something which is kind of, very niche thing that only, 1% of people would share that they have the same problem, or maybe it's something bigger. But I think that kind of early, maybe some people call it customer development, like Steve Blank style. Maybe that's kind of the right way to word it, but that's what I would do in the beginning. So
how do we do that? Because I feel like a lot of founders will have a problem they want to solve. They have an idea, and then they'll go get some giant market data. 1 in 5 people have a mental health issue or need help, or 1 in 25 have a serious mental illness. And they'll say, oh, see, look there, 20, 30 million people need this.
Yeah.
What's the fallacy there?
Yeah.
How do you make sure you're not making a bad assumption about how many people really need the thing that you want to build?
Yeah, that's a really important point. So I think that I would recommend that everyone reads Startup User Manual, Steve Blank's book. That's basically the go-to book in the beginning to understand what is the customer development process, how it works. It's a great process which works, and it helps you to actually learn the market from ground up, not from kind of top to bottom. So I think that's really important because it's easy to read all sorts of reports and they don't really tell you much. And then there's also something called the MOM test book, which is a great resource where you basically kind of learn to ask the right kinds of questions. So it's easy to ask very biased questions when you go out there, like asking someone hey, if I had something really cool, would you buy it? Then people may say that, yes, of course I would buy it. But then actually they wouldn't. So, it's kind of a great methodology, great book about how to ask the right kind of non-biased questions. So that's another great book to read. And then I think
that's awesome.
Part of this is also that it's kind of like the Steve Jobs style, which I always like, that you kind of need to understand the market. I would say it's kind of I typically to myself, I say that it's 50% I need to understand the market and 50% I need to create the market. And what it means is that by being able to create the market, you got to understand the underlying problems that sometimes people will not tell you. So you got to kind of see beyond what typically is today possible. What I mean by that is that a lot of people didn't realize even a few years ago that smartphones would be in everyone's pocket and you could collect data in a new way, making it possible to deliver a new type of care in depression or anxiety or in other diabetes, whatever disease areas, which is kind of something which is now transforming care. So a lot of entrepreneurs, they saw these things that, hey, that's going to happen. But that's kind of what I'm referring to when I'm saying half of it needs to be you need to create the market. You need to create, set the vision and then start building towards that and getting people excited behind the vision. But you also have to have a good grounding on a real customer need.
I love that you're sharing that. And what I think is important here, there's a lot of podcasts and resources out there for entrepreneurs, but there are a lot of people trying to build in this space that aren't your typical startup founder. They're clinicians or they're researchers or they're scientists that they've come up with something that might work now that technology has advanced to a certain place, and they really aren't part of the startup ecosystem. And I think we need to communicate a lot of this to those folks so they can build good businesses around their great ideas. I'm really grateful that you were willing to share that. And one last question along those lines, what kind of traction points or metrics do you think an early stage pre-seed founder needs to have in their mind? I need to get to here so that an investor will help me. What does that look like in this space?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I mean, it depends quite a lot, but I would say that the first piece, if I was an investor and someone was pitching an idea, I would probably first want to understand have you really understood your market? And again, not the PwC reports on the top market, but that bottom up user research. Have you talked to kind of clinicians, or have you if you're trying to sell something to psychiatrists, as an example, you're thinking that you have this awesome idea on a tool for psychiatrists. Then have you talked to 100 psychiatrists? Have you interviewed them? Have you asked all these questions? What is your understanding on what were their perceptions on your idea and what are actually the needs that they have? What did you uncover? So I would first want to understand that, because that's really important in the very early stage, whether the kind of idea holds water in a way. Or it's very important also as a founder to have your own kind of a strong vision. So the market need is going to be important, but like consultants sometimes can also identify interesting like market needs. And you could argument that, hey, there's a great business case here. But I think it's also going to be so much about the drive and about the personal passion, and maybe the personal experience is what led you here. So I think that's kind of like telling about the personal story and expressing that and making that kind of part of your pitch is going to be really important in the early days. So I guess those are like the pre-seed or the very early stage things before you may have any product ready or you don't have revenue yet or whatever. So
that's awesome. Well, one other question I'd like to ask people before our time runs up is I just want to talk about stigma in general. I mean, that's our primary topic here. We're trying to spread the message of mental health and get people talking about it and normalize these conversations. What would you say about where we are in society with stigma? Is it increasing? Is it decreasing? How has it impacted you? What can we be doing about it? Would love to get your thoughts.
Yeah. Well, I'm an optimist. So, I mean, I would say that we're definitely like heading in the right direction. There's been a lot of more discussion about stigma, a lot more open discussion about mental illnesses and mental health problems in the recent years. And there's been a lot of celebrities who thought about their problems, which they're leading the way, which is awesome. I think there's a lot more open discussion. And I think that's part of the reason why there's such a surge in also the need and why people are opening up to these issues, and that it's okay. Like, mental health is not separate from physical health. Like, we need to change our thinking as a society on that, because if you really dive into the biology of mental health and understand these things and brain science and neurology, you'll see that it's not like something woo-woo. Mental health is not something intangible. It's very tangible. It's rooted in biology in many, many ways. So there's no reason to have all this stigma. Like, it's not like anyone's crazy or anyone's fault per se. It's like, it's just a human nature, human biology, the experience here. So I think that's kind of an important tone and vibe to also what we with Meru and myself always try to also emphasize, that this is not something which is, we shouldn't treat this in a separate way than any bone fracture or anything else. And actually, I would almost argument as a final kind of a point here, that if you think our society treats like fractured bones immediately, and we're kind of taking that very seriously, and if you break your leg, you're going to get treated. But what if someone's kind of suicidal, which can actually kill you? Broken bones don't typically kill people nowadays anymore, or even if it's left untreated for a while. But if your suicidality or severe depression or PTSD is left untreated, it kills a lot of people every year. We should take this seriously.
Couple quick questions for you, and I agree with what you said. A couple quick questions for you. Been asking some folks like a little bit of a lightning round here at the end lately. What's your favorite mental health app?
That's a great question.
You can say your own if you want, but that's cheating.
Well, yeah, I like Headspace quite a lot. Calm as well. They've got some great stuff that I've used myself. Then I also used Pacifica, which I think they got acquired by United Healthcare. I think they're called something else nowadays. But they had some really good stuff in the app. And those would probably be my kind of few favorite mental health apps.
Got it. So that covers meditation app as well. What's your favorite book that you've read lately?
Maybe just what I'm reading now, which is super exciting, is a book about psychological safety and what it means to create companies and culture and workplaces that are psychologically safe. The concept of psychological safety is basically a culture where it's okay to express all the different sides of your kind of personality that you bring to work, meaning that, if you have any criticism, you have any kind of doubts about things, any fears, the company and the culture accepts that and kind of wants to get all the feedback, versus like kind of punishing for failure or punishing for actually being open about feedback. So that's kind of a really interesting book that I've been reading.
What's it called again?
Let me check. I can't remember the name right now. So I can definitely send that to you also.
Okay, sure. Yeah, I'll get that from you and I'll link it so people can find it. Favorite self-care activity? When you need to do something for yourself, what do you like to do?
Yeah, so I regularly meditate myself. So that's like my daily practice. And then do my like kind of running and jogging 3-4 times a week or so. So I think those are a couple of things. And then one thing which has been really important for myself has been looking at my diet. So eating whole foods, vegetables, fruits, nuts, seeds, healthy things versus processed foods has made a huge difference in my own well-being and my energy levels. So some good
That's
tips
great.
there.
Well, look, man, I really appreciate you coming on and doing this and telling folks about what you're up to and the advice that you gave for entrepreneurs here. I really appreciate you doing that. And I think that many of them will too. So look, thank you very much for doing this.
Thanks, Stephen. Your work is awesome, incredible. And thanks so much for having me. Really appreciate it.
Kristian, thank you again for coming on. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this. To our listeners, we will link to everything that he mentioned from his white papers and research and some of the other materials in the show notes and on our website as well. Thank you to our listeners for being here. It really means a lot. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love your feedback on this episode or on anything that we've published so far, or your feedback on what you want to hear from us. You can reach out to us on the website, stigmapodcast.com. You can find us on Twitter at StigmaCast. You can find us on Instagram at Stigma Podcast. And we have regular old-fashioned email as well, info@stigmapodcast.com. So please reach out to us. Let us know what you think, good, bad, or indifferent. And if you like our content, we would be really grateful for a like or a review or a subscription on whatever podcast platform you use. And until next time, stay safe and thank you for being here.